I don't want to go. I don't want to go, sir, please.
An interesting fan theory has been making rounds on the internet recently that really makes us think about Spider-Man Far From Home a little differently. The trailer dropped a little more than a week ago, but it only took Marvel fans a day to start picking it apart frame by frame.
What just happened?
Recent comments by Kevin Feige, Marvel Studios president, gave this theory a lot more clout, and we wanted to break it down and dig our teeth into this theory to see if it holds any weight. Did Peter Parker really get off the school bus in the beginning of Infinity War? When we heard of this crazy theory surrounding Avengers Endgame and partially Spider-Man Far From Home, it got our spidey senses tingling, to say the least. With the release of the new Far From Home trailer, we got a great look at what to expect not just from the new Spidey movie due out in July, but some subtle hints as to how Endgame ends. We'll be breaking down a big portion of what we currently know about Endgame, along with Ant-Man, Spider-Man, and a few Avengers movies, so it goes without saying, spoiler alert. And make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the latest news and theories of your favorite movies. And don't forget to put on that tinfoil hat, because things get a little out of hand to explain this theory.
I should have stayed on the bus.
With all that out of the way, let's sling right into the video. In Spider-Man Far From Home, our friendly neighborhood science nerd Peter Parker makes his way to Europe for a school field trip. But as he's packing his suitcase, he tells himself in the trailer, Europe doesn't really need a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But what kind of movie would that be? Peter finds himself in the suit anyway, no thanks to Nick Fury. But there's something peculiar about all this. Both Peter Parker and Nick Fury were lost to the snap. And Peter had the Iron Spider suit in Infinity War. So then why is he busting up baddies in Europe with this new black and red suit? Well, that's where things start to get a little weird, so bear with us here. Peter Parker never actually got off the bus headed for the Museum of Modern Art in Infinity War.
Surprise!
Now I know what you're thinking. Peter Parker definitely got off the bus in Infinity War. And you'd be right. Peter Parker got off the bus in the timeline that the Avengers failed to defeat Thanos. That's the key in all of this nonsense. Far From Home takes place in an alternate timeline where Thanos never wielded the 6 Infinity Stones. If you look closely in the trailer when Peter picks up his passport, you can see they've left his birth year and date of issue out of the passport. This could be a way for Marvel to keep things under a more official wrap before Endgame releases, so we have no way of knowing without a doubt when Far From Home takes place. Interestingly though, Peter was born in August, the same month that Amazing Fantasy number 15 was released, Spider-Man's first comic appearance. Anyways, Spider-Man Far From Home starts just mere minutes after Endgame leaves off, according to Kevin Feige, Marvel Studios president.
What did you just say?
I take that back.
And the only timeline we know of that Peter Parker owns the Iron Spider suit would be the same timeline where Peter hops off the bus, fights his way through New York City with the Hulk, and hops aboard the Q-ship with Tony Stark and Doctor Strange. Not a whole lot about Endgame has been otherwise leaked, intentionally. But Marvel has left us a trail of breadcrumbs across almost all the movies, trailers, and end credit scenes that can help us decipher what's going on. Now, this theory relies on a couple of presumptions of Avengers Endgame, which is where things get a little strange. The theory itself is fairly simple. Peter couldn't have gotten off the bus because the Infinity War never happened. But what makes it really difficult is when we start asking how that happened. Avengers Endgame takes place both before and after the war. Thanos has retreated to a farm on a new world of his creation, Titan II, which is a nod to the Infinity Gauntlet comics, where Thanos retires to a peaceful life on his new ideal Titan, farming and working the land. The Avengers, or what's left of them post-snap, are recoiling from this aftermath. We have a few key players still left in this timeline, including Ant-Man, possibly Captain Marvel, Captain America, Thor, and possibly Tony Stark. These heroes are particularly important to Endgame, because each of them holds an important piece of the puzzle that can undo the snap, so to say, or otherwise prevent it from ever happening. Without undoing what Thanos has done, Spider-Man Far From Home wouldn't exist. Peter Parker would still be a pile of ashes scattered across Titan. In Infinity War, we saw Doctor Strange give up the Time Stone willingly to Thanos, after Doctor Strange saw only one possible outcome to defeating him. Spoiler alert, giving up the Time Stone to spare Tony Stark is unfortunately the only way to defeat Thanos. Doctor Strange is no idiot, and has proved himself to be one of the wittiest members of the Avengers. It's no accident that Heimdall sent Bruce to the Sanctum in New York City. We can only assume that Heimdall, before his death, peered into many futures to find that Doctor Strange would be required to defeat Thanos. While we don't know the true extent of Heimdall's powers compared to Doctor Strange's Time Stone, it is possible that he could only peer forward, whereas Doctor Strange can explore all possibilities. It's worth noting that in chess, the endgame is where players begin to willingly give up valuable pieces in order to give themselves a more strategic foothold on the board, thus ensuring victory. See? Doctor Strange had a plan all along, and your favorite Marvel heroes weren't lost for nothing. If we go back to the start of the trailer for Endgame, we see Tony Stark and Nebula drifting off into space, running out of air and supplies. But Tony Stark says something that we found a bit intriguing.
Just for the record, being adrift in space with zero promise of rescue is more fun than it sounds.
Being adrift in space with zero promise of rescue is more fun than it sounds. Now, in the comics, Pepper's Iron Man suit is called Rescue, and in leaked set photos, we saw Gwyneth Paltrow donning the purple suit behind a green screen. We can't say for sure whether Pepper comes to the rescue or not, but it is an interesting coincidence. I don't know about you, but the irony of having Tony rescued by Rescue would be too good. Jumping back into it, the next piece of our puzzle lies with Scott Lang, or Ant-Man. The last we saw in the movies, Ant-Man was stuck in the quantum realm with Hank Pym, Hope Van Dyne, and Janet Van Dyne being vaporized by Thanos on the outside, stranding him with no way of return. Before Scott hops into the quantum realm, though, Janet warns Scott that if he gets sucked into a time vortex, they won't be able to save him. The next we see of him, Widow and Captain America are sitting in the overgrown Avengers HQ when a feed pops up in front of them. Scott and his van parked at the front door with Scott talking at the camera to have Cap let him in. So, somehow, Scott survived the snap inside the quantum realm and possibly a time vortex. But here's the real kicker. If you look closely at the feed, you can notice in the top left corner, the video is coming from an archive folder. So, unfortunately, we have no way of knowing for sure where or even when Scott is at the moment. Although Scott shows no signs of phase shifting like we saw Ghost doing in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Assuming that Scott is in the current timeline, post-Infinity War snap, it might be possible that what's left of the Avengers find a way to modify the quantum tunnel to funnel their way into the mysterious time vortex. Are you still with us on this? If we assume all these presumptions are really correct, and Avengers Endgame really will take place before the Infinity War, and Tony Stark really does use the quantum tunnel to go back before Thanos crafts the gauntlet, it really could be possible that snap can be undone, creating a sort of alternate timeline time loop. One thing that the original poster of this theory didn't take into account was that it's entirely possible there won't even be a Tony Stark to create the Iron Spider suit by the time Peter heads to Europe. If Tony Stark finds himself in the past fighting a mad titan, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that he never makes it back to create the Iron Spider suit to begin with. Another theory is that by going back in time, Tony Stark won't create the Iron Spider suit to begin with, in the best interest of Peter. By giving Peter the Iron Spider suit, Tony might feel like Peter would have too much power, or too much responsibility. The events that occurred on Titan surely must have given Tony insight into how much power he truly gave him, and in turn, much more power. Unfortunately, as we dive deeper down the spider hole, these theories get increasingly hard to explain in a cinematic universe where everything has been planned to the last little detail. A vast majority of the movies would need to be retconned, as they'd technically be on an alternate timeline running parallel to the Far From Home timeline. Although, no matter what, Spider-Man Far From Home begins assuming that the snap never happened to begin with, and there could be many reasons that Peter has any other suit than the Iron Spider. One last tidbit from the Endgame trailer gives us a couple more clues about what really happens that we found quite interesting. At the end, the Avengers logo comes on screen, and we see the large A in the back start to come back together, as if to undo the snap. We also see the word Avengers go from translucent to solid, implying a phase shift state, like we see in Ant-Man. It's no secret that Ant-Man plays a huge role in the upcoming movie, but we never expected this web to be strung together so intricately. To wrap things up, anything and everything could and can happen in Endgame, but it can't help us from dreaming up wildly absurd conspiracy theories about a vastly complex cinematic universe. Although, with as much time and money has gone into these movies for the past 11 years, it may not be too crazy to think that Marvel really has been leaving us a trail of breadcrumbs to follow all these years. Hopefully, when Endgame launches in April, we get all the answers we wanted and more. Drop us a comment and let us know what you think really happens in Avengers Endgame. Make sure to snap that subscribe button and like the video to get more breakdowns of your favorite films. Hit that bell button too, so you can get instant notifications without missing a beat. We hope you enjoyed our rant.